Hello students, the slide shows two fetuses of same gestational ages, that is 16 weeks. The first fetus involving showing the normal anatomy and embryology of the gastrointestinal tract, while the other one shows the pathology in the gastrointestinal tract. To better understand this, we must know the normal anatomy and embryology of the gastrointestinal tract. So we'll begin our today's lecture, the part 1 of development of GIT. We'll commence our lecture today under following headings: the primitive gut, its formation, extent and division, the divisions of gut into foregut, midgut and hindgut with its extent and derivatives, the peritoneum, that is the gut mesentery and their derivatives, and we'll cover the foregut completely today by knowing its development of foregut, that is the esophagus, stomach, liver, extrahepatic biliary apparatus and pancreas, and the associated congenital anomalies of foregut. The midgut and hindgut will be dealt in the second part of the development. So, what is primitive gut? Can you see in this first picture this yellow structure? This is all representing the primitive gut. In the second picture, we can clearly see its formation. You all know about the two folding process that takes place, that is cephalocaudal and the lateral folding. During the 4th week, because of these two foldings, a portion of the endoderm lined cavity of the yolk sac is incorporated into the embryo, and this forms the primitive gut. So now let's see how these cephalocaudal and lateral fold leads to the formation of primitive gut. This is the sagittal section of the embryo. So in this particular diagram, this is the cranial and the caudal pole. That means the head and the tail end of the embryo. This is the dorsal aspect, and towards the yolk sac cavity, this is the ventral aspect of the embryo. So the sagittal section at different stages of development, the last section showing at the end of the first month, shows the effects of the cephalocaudal folding. So we can see because of the head and the tail fold, this portion of the yolk sac is getting incorporated into the endoderm lined yolk sac cavity is getting incorporated into the embryo. This leads to the formation of gut. So in the process, what is happening is two portals are created. Portals means the entry point into the embryo is created into the primitive gut. This is the cranial portal, cranial intestinal portal, and this is the caudal intestinal portal. And this yolk sac, portion of the yolk sac cavity which is incorporated into the embryo, forms the gut tube. And we can see gradually what is happening is the communication between the gut tube and the yolk sac is narrowing down. It is gradually decreasing. And the last observation that you can make is this cardiac bulge area, which was initially located cranial to the embryo, to the developing foregut, developing gut tube. The heart bulge was cranial to it, and now this heart bulge or the cardiac bulge has come ventral to the gut tube. Now this again shows a transverse section through the embryo. In this we can better understand the lateral folding. So in this particular picture, this is the yolk, because this is yolk sac, so this will be the ventral part of the embryo. This is the dorsal part of the embryo and the lateral ends of the embryo. So these are the lateral folds which are gradually commencing, and what they are doing, the two lateral folds are coming are trying to approximate in the center. They are trying to come close, and in the last picture you can see the lateral folds have approximated, have come closer to each other and closed the ventral body wall. So the ventral body wall has been closed. So in this way, this portion of the yolk sac which formed the primitive gut is now not communicating with the extraembryonic coelom. So this is the gut tube. So now we have understood how the primitive gut is formed by the cephalocaudal and the lateral fold. Now let's see how this primitive gut, that all the portions of the primitive gut develops. The endoderm, the yolk sac lining was the endoderm lining which got incorporated. So the endoderm is going to provide the epithelial lining of the entire digestive tract. The parenchyma cells of the glands of GIT, like liver and pancreas. So the special cells like hepatocytes, exocrine, endocrine cells of the pancreas are also derived from the endoderm. The visceral mesoderm is going to form the muscle, connective tissue and peritoneum part of the GIT, and the stroma of the glands of GIT will be formed by this visceral mesoderm. Now let's come to the extent of the primitive gut. The primitive gut extends from the buccopharyngeal membrane to the cloacal membrane. Now you can see that the middle part of the gut, which is going to be the future midgut, this part is during initial portion is in communication with the yolk sac by the Wittlein duct or the yolk stalk. In the second picture also you can see the middle part of the primitive gut is in communication with the yolk sac cavity through the Wittlein duct or the yolk stalk. This communication gradually narrows with the advancement of age. So after completing the formation, we now come to the divisions of gut tube. The gut tube is divided into three portions: the foregut, midgut and hindgut. So in an early embryonic period, let's see how these gut tubes are divided. So the first part, that is the foregut, is from the buccopharyngeal membrane to the cranial intestinal portal. This cranial intestinal portal was the portal or entry point from the yolk sac cavity into the gut part. So between these 2 points is the foregut. So this cranial intestinal portal was the portal or the entry point from the yolk sac into the gut tube part, and the caudal intestinal towards the head end of the gut tube part, and the caudal intestinal portal is the entry point from the yolk sac cavity into the tail end of the gut tube part. So between this cranial intestinal portal and the caudal intestinal portal, the portion of the gut tube which is in communication with the yolk sac cavity is through the Wittlein duct is the midgut part. Now coming to the last part of the gut tube, that is the hindgut. The hindgut extends from the caudal intestinal portal to the distalmost extent, that is the cloacal membrane. So we completed the gut tube divisions in the early period. Now as the age advances, there are some changes that are taking place in the primitive gut tube. So in the first picture we can see that certain structures are developing from the gut tube. One important structure that we have to see carefully is the formation of this liver bud. This liver bud is an important landmark because this will help us to divide the gut tube into foregut and midgut in the later period. So later on, the foregut is extending from the buccopharyngeal membrane to the liver bud, and the midgut will be caudal to this liver bud to the approximately to the junction of right 2/3 and left 1/3 of the transverse colon. So in the second picture we can see that carefully, that this is the junction of the midgut extent will be right from the liver bud, and in the adult it will be the entry point of the common bile duct into the duodenum to the junction of the right 2/3 and the left 1/3 of the transverse colon. The hindgut part will be the portion from the left 1/3 of the transverse colon to right up to the cloacal membrane. So the foregut, which is from the buccopharyngeal membrane to the liver bud, is divided into two more compartments, that is the pharyngeal gut or the pharynx and the postpharyngeal part of the foregut. So in the second picture we can see it carefully, this yellow portion of the foregut, which is between the buccopharyngeal membrane to a diverticulum, blue diverticulum right here. This blue diverticulum is the respiratory diverticulum. So this respiratory diverticulum is going to form the lower respiratory system, that is trachea and lung buds. So another important landmark, that is the respiratory diverticulum, is going to divide the foregut into a pharyngeal part between the buccopharyngeal membrane to the respiratory diverticulum, and distal from the respiratory diverticulum till the level of the liver bud is the postpharyngeal part of the foregut. Now we come to the most important part of our lecture, the derivatives of foregut. So the derivatives of foregut are, from the pharyngeal part of the foregut develops the pharynx. The lower respiratory system, the trachea and the lung, also develops from the respiratory diverticulum. The postpharyngeal part develops into the esophagus, stomach, duodenum, not the entire part of the duodenum, but the part of the duodenum which is proximal to the opening of the common bile duct, that is in the middle of the second part of the duodenum. Also the associated glands of GIT, that is the liver, the extrahepatic biliary apparatus, gallbladder, and pancreas. These are all 8 derivatives of foregut. Now, distal to the foregut, from the liver bud or the entry point of the common bile duct into the duodenum to the junction of the right 2/3 and left 1/3 of the transverse colon, this is the midgut. And this midgut is temporally connected to the yolk sac by the vitelline duct or the yolk stalk. The derivatives of the midgut are the duodenum, which is the part of the duodenum which is distal to the opening of the common bile duct, the portions of the jejunum, ileum, cecum, appendix, ascending colon, and the transverse colon at the junction of right 2/3 of the transverse colon. The hindgut again is from the left 1/3 of the transverse colon to the cloacal membrane. The derivatives of the hindgut are the left 1/3 of the transverse colon, the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and the upper part of the anal canal. So all these derivatives of foregut, midgut, and hindgut should be learnt and remembered. The blood supply of the gut is, the foregut part is supplied by the celiac artery. This is the celiac artery which is supplying the foregut part. The second artery is the superior mesenteric artery, which is the artery of the midgut. So all the portions which are deriving from the midgut part will be supplied by the superior mesenteric artery. The hindgut artery is the inferior mesenteric artery. So all the portions of the gut from the left 1/3 of the transverse colon till the cloacal membrane will be supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. Now a brief about the molecular regulation of the gut tube. This diagram is showing the midgut and hindgut regions. The morphogen sonic hedgehog is secreted by the gut endoderm and induces the expression of Hox gene. The Hox gene in the surrounding mesoderm. The Hox expression then initiates a cascade of genes that instruct the gut endoderm to differentiate into its regional identities. So signaling between the two tissues is an example of epithelial mesenchymal interaction. Now we come to gut mesenteries. What do we mean by mesentery? Mesentery is actually double fold of peritoneum through which any organ is suspended to the body wall. Now in this picture what you can appreciate is the gut. The gut tube can be appreciated. Now this is the anterior body wall and this is the posterior body wall. And we can clearly see that this entire gut tube is suspended through the dorsal mesentery to the posterior body wall. But anteriorly, if you can see, the ventral mesentery is only limited, the ventral mesentery which is suspending the portion of caudal portion of esophagus, the stomach, and the proximal part of the duodenum. This portion of the gut is suspended through the ventral mesentery to the anterior body wall. So initially the entire gut tube was suspended anteriorly and posteriorly by the ventral and dorsal mesentery, but what happened later on is the entire most of the portion of the ventral mesentery disappeared, and only in relation to the caudal part of esophagus, stomach, and the duodenum, this much portion of the ventral mesentery has been retained. Now in this ventral mesentery, is derived from the septum transversum, and this is the area of the septum transversum in which the liver grows. So because of this growth of the liver into the septum transversum, which is actually the ventral mesentery part, the ventral mesentery divided into two portions, that is a portion in front of the liver and a portion behind the liver. The portion of ventral mesentery which is in front of the liver develops into falciform ligament, and the portion of ventral mesentery which is behind the liver between the stomach and the liver develops into the lesser omentum. So the derivatives of the ventral mesentery are two, that is falciform ligament and the lesser omentum. The dorsal mesentery is the double fold of peritoneum which is connecting the entire gut tube right from the lower end of esophagus to the cloaca. This entire portion of the gut tube is connected through this double fold of peritoneum to the posterior abdominal wall. This is the dorsal mesentery. This dorsal mesentery portion, which is behind the stomach, is called as the dorsal mesogastrium. So this develops into the dorsal mesogastrium. This is the first derivative of dorsal mesentery. The second derivative of the dorsal mesentery in relation to the duodenum is the dorsal mesoduodenum. The third derivative is the mesentery proper, which is the mesentery of jejunum-ileal loops, the loops of jejunum and ileum. The fourth part is the dorsal mesocolon. The entire portion of the colon is suspended through the posterior abdominal wall through the dorsal mesocolon. So these are the four derivatives of the dorsal mesentery. Now these pictures show the derivatives of the dorsal mesentery. The dorsal mesogastrium, that is the dorsal mesentery of the stomach, develops into the greater omentum. This portion is the dorsal mesoduodenum. The mesentery proper or the mesentery is the mesentery of the jejunum and ileum. Now what we can appreciate is the entire colon is suspended through the dorsal mesocolon. Over here also we can see the entire colon is suspended through the dorsal mesocolon. But we know that in adult the only the transverse colon and the sigmoid colon, they are suspended with their mesocolons. So that means some portions of the colon during the development will lose their dorsal mesocolon and will become retroperitoneum. In this picture, which is a sagittal section, we can see the dorsal mesentery more clear now. So this is the stomach with its greater omentum, which is the derivative of the dorsal mesogastrium. So this is the greater omentum. Behind the stomach, we can see lying on the posterior abdominal wall, this is the pancreas and the duodenum, both covered only on its anterior aspect by the peritoneum. So these are both retroperitoneal organs. The duodenum, the fixed part of the duodenum is retroperitoneum. Then below is a section of the transverse colon with its mesentery over here. This is the mesentery of transverse colon, the transverse mesocolon. And in the lowermost portion, this is the cut section of the small intestinal loops with its mesentery, the mesentery proper. So what happens later on is that there is fusion of the transverse mesocolon with the greater omentum. So that we can see over here. And the portion of the peritoneal cavity which is behind the stomach is here. It is called as the omental bursa, or the lesser sac is formed behind the stomach. Now let's begin with the development of esophagus, which is the derivative of foregut. The respiratory diverticulum is actually the lung bud. It is going to develop into the lungs and trachea. This diverticulum, respiratory diverticulum, arises from the ventral wall of foregut. So this blue area that you can see, which is arising from which wall of the foregut? This is the foregut. So from its ventral wall, this diverticulum lung bud is arising, and this is going to develop into the lung and trachea. This is arising exactly at the junction. So respiratory diverticulum is actually the junction between the pharyngeal part and the postpharyngeal part of the foregut. Now, once the respiratory diverticulum has been formed, so in the second picture, you can clearly see this is a lateral view. The figure A is the lateral view, where the foregut, from the ventral wall of the foregut, respiratory diverticulum is originating. Now, this respiratory diverticulum we know is going to form the trachea and the lung, and the rest of the portions of the foregut is going to develop into its derivatives. So in the adult, what do we see? Is there any communication between the trachea and the esophagus? No. So there should be a separation between the trachea and the developing esophagus. For that separation, what happens is a septum appears between the respiratory diverticulum and the dorsal part of the foregut. That is the tracheoesophageal septum. This tracheoesophageal septum separates the respiratory diverticulum from the foregut. So finally, with the tracheoesophageal septum, a complete division of foregut take place into a respiratory primordia, which is the ventral part, and the dorsal part, which is the esophagus, which is going to develop into esophagus. Now, the next process is the lengthening of esophagus. So the esophagus then lengthens, and this lengthening of esophagus is brought about by the descent of heart and lungs. So the development of esophagus, we are done with the development of esophagus. So it started with the respiratory diverticulum from the ventral wall of the foregut, the tracheoesophageal septum, which separated the respiratory diverticulum from the foregut, dividing it into tracheal part and an esophageal part, and finally lengthening of esophagus takes place. Now, after knowing the normal embryological development of the esophagus, we now come to the esophageal anomalies, which most commonly includes the esophageal atresia or tracheoesophageal fistula, esophageal stenosis, and congenital hiatal hernias. Now, see this picture carefully. What you can observe right here is the two tubular structure. One is trachea in front and behind is the esophagus. We can appreciate over here that there is a communication between the lower end of the esophagus with the trachea, and there is a discontinuity of the esophagus. The upper end of the esophagus is atretic. So this is called as the esophageal atresia and the tracheoesophageal fistula. The tracheoesophageal fistula, communication of the trachea with the esophagus. This is found in 3,000 to 4,500 live births. This picture is showing various types of the tracheoesophageal fistula. The 90% of tracheoesophageal fistula has the communication of the distal part of the esophagus with the trachea, and the proximal end of the esophagus is actually the blind end, atretic end. This is in the 90% of cases, followed by the type in which both the ends of the esophagus are blind. This is 4%. The third type in which is also 4%, where there is a communication of esophagus with the trachea, and followed by 1% of cases in which the proximal part of the esophagus is in communication with the trachea, and the distal part of esophagus is blind end. And the last type, which is also 1%, is when both the ends of proximal and distal ends of esophagus are in communication with the trachea. Now let's understand what is the cause of this tracheoesophageal fistula. Now we know that there is a tracheoesophageal septum which separates the respiratory primordium with the foregut. So when there is posterior deviation of the tracheoesophageal septum, this leads to incomplete separation of esophagus from the respiratory primordium. This leads to the esophageal atresia and tracheoesophageal fistula. Now because of this, what will happen is, in the fetus, the excess amount of amniotic fluids will not be engulfed by the fetus. Instead of that, the amniotic fluid will get accumulated in the amniotic sac. So this leads to the polyhydramnios. The other condition is the congenital hiatal hernia. So during the development of esophagus, we saw that the last step in the development of esophagus was the lengthening of esophagus with the descent of heart and lungs. So if the esophagus fails to lengthen, this is a normal esophagus which is lengthened. If it fails to lengthen, it leads the stomach to be pulled up into the esophageal hiatus through the diaphragm. So this stomach which has entered through the diaphragm into the thoracic cavity, this is called as the hiatal hernia, and this is because of the shortened esophagus. Now we start with the development of next viscera, which is the stomach. So the stomach actually is derivative of the foregut, and it appears as a fusiform dilution. So you can see in the first picture, can you see the stomach? Yes, the stomach is seen as a fusiform dilatation at 4 weeks. But is the stomach a fusiform shape in the adults? No, it is not. It is J-shaped in adults. So we'll see how this shape is changing. and how it acquires the final shape. So in the next picture, you can see this is a fusiform shape of the stomach, which is there at the 4 weeks of development. The shape is fusiform, and what about the position? The position of the stomach is median. So the stomach is median in position in such a way that its cranial and the caudal ends both are lying at the median plane, and this fusiform dilation of the stomach is also at the median plane. So in this enlarged view of the fusiform dilation of the stomach, we can see that the stomach has a left surface, it has a right surface, it has a ventral surface which can be seen, and dorsal surface. So here we can see this fusiform dilation of the stomach, and the shape is fusiform and the position is median right now. But we know that the position of the stomach is not median. What is the position of stomach in adult? Yes, it is towards the left side. So let's see what all changes are taking place. So for that, there is 90-degree clockwise rotation of stomach around its longitudinal axis. So this is the longitudinal axis of the stomach. So the stomach will rotate 90-degree clockwise. Imagine the clock on the cranial aspect of the fusiform dilation. So this 90-degree clockwise rotation, because of this left surface is going to come ventral. So in the picture below, we can see over here, this is the transverse section of the stomach, and this is the posterior aspect, anterior aspect, the right and left aspect of the stomach. So we can see initially this is the original dorsal aspect. This is the originally ventral aspect of the stomach. So when the stomach is rotating 90-degree clockwise, you can see in the subsequent pictures, when the stomach has rotated 90 degrees clockwise, what has happened? This was the initial posterior dorsal surface. This was the initial ventral surface. So what happened to the initial ventral surface? The ventral surface, which was initially ventral, has now come to the right side, and the surface which was originally a left surface, this is the original left surface, this original left surface has come to the more anterior plane. This has become ventral. So the originally whatever was the left surface will now become the ventral surface, and originally what was the right surface will now become the dorsal surface, right? So this is the reason why over here also we can see this is the original left surface, this will become the ventral surface over here. So this is the embryological basis why of the left and the right vagus nerve. So initially the left vagus nerve was innervating the left surface of the fusiform dilation over here, and the right vagus was innervating the right surface of the fusiform dilation. But because the stomach has rotated 90-degree clockwise, so its left surface is now which surface? Because of the rotation, yes, then left surface is now the ventral surface, which is more clear in the picture below. This left surface after rotation is now which surface? The anterior surface. This is the reason why the left vagus nerve is supplying the anterior surface, and the right vagus nerve, which was initially supplying the left surface of the stomach, is now supplying which surface? Because the right surface has now become the dorsal surface. So is that now clear? So there is a 90-degree clockwise rotation along the longitudinal axis of the stomach, because of which the surfaces have changed. The surfaces have changed. The original left has become the ventral surface of the stomach, and the original right surface has now become the dorsal surface of the stomach. When this rotation movement, 90-degree clockwise rotation, is taking place at stomach, the stomach is simultaneously growing also. But the growth of the stomach is not proportionate. The growth of stomach is, there is differential growth of stomach. That means certain regions of the stomach grow at much faster pace as compared to the other regions of the stomach. So the dorsal border of the stomach grows at a faster pace as compared to its ventral border. As we know that after rotation, what is happening? The ventral border or the ventral aspect, original ventral aspect of this stomach will later on form the right border.
will come onto the right side and will form the right border. The original dorsal border after rotation will form the left border of the stump. So because the dorsal border is growing at a much faster rate, the dorsal border which after rotation has become the left border will form the greater curvature. So as it is growing faster, it will form the greater curvature. Whereas the original ventral border, which later on becomes the left border, is going to form the lesser curvature because it is growing at a lesser pace as compared to the greater curvature. So because of this differential growth, the curvatures are established, both greater and the lesser curvature. Greater on the left border and the lesser curvature on the right border of the stomach. Because of this greater curvature which is formed, the portion of the stomach which is raised above the level of the cardia, this forms the fundus.
So now we are at this stage. So at this particular picture, the position of the stomach is still not final. So for that, the cardiac end and the pyloric end has to move. So for that, there is one more rotation which is taking place in the anterior-posterior axis. Because of this anterior-posterior axis rotation, what will happen is the caudal end, which is the pyloric end, will move to the right and in upward direction. The cardiac end will move to the left side and directed towards the downward direction. And because of this rotation, the final position of the stomach is acquired with its axis, which is now the final position of the stomach, which is shifted to the left, and the axis is running from the above, from the left side to below to the right side. So this final rotation now brings the stomach in its final position. So we have now seen that during the development of the stomach, both rotation are taking place or along its longitudinal axis and along its anterior-posterior axis, and differential growth of surfaces of the stomach are taking place. So while doing the rotatory movement, what is happening is that the stomach is creating a space behind it. So when it got rotated towards the left, what happened is there is a space which has been created behind the stomach, and this space is called as the lesser sac. Now let's see again a section which is a quite extensive section from anterior to the posterior aspect. The stomach is, you can see the position of the stomach out here. This is at the central position and it is covered by the peritoneum. It is hanging anteriorly and posteriorly through the ventral mesentery and the dorsal mesentery. So this is the dorsal mesogastrium by which it is hanging to the posterior abdominal wall, and this is the ventral mesogastrium. We can see that the liver is developing here in between the anterior abdominal wall and the stomach. So it is splitting the ventral mesogastrium into two portions. So this portion between the liver and the stomach, this is the lesser omentum, and the portion connecting the liver to the anterior abdominal wall, this is the falciform ligament. Now see carefully what is happening behind the stomach. So this is the dorsal mesogastrium. Between the two folds of the dorsal mesogastrium, one more viscera is developing. This is the spleen. So the spleen develops in the dorsal mesogastrium. So do remember this point, that spleen is not the derivative of foregut. It is not the derivative of gut tube. It is actually developing within the dorsal mesogastrium. So in this next picture, you can see when the stomach has rotated, shifted to the left, what is happening because of this shift, the lesser omentum has been created over here. And you can see with the shift of the stomach, its final position has been acquired, and all the peritoneum layers are more definite right now over here. So the anomaly associated with the stomach is the congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. So over here, this is the pyloric part. So there is hypertrophy of the circular muscle coat of pylorus, leading to narrowing of pyloric sphincter. So because of this, whatever contents are there in the stomach, it is difficult for them to pass through the pylorus, so resulting in vomiting by the infant. The duodenum lies just below the stomach. So whatever changes are taking place during the development of the stomach, the effect will be there on the duodenum as well. With the rotation of the stomach, the duodenum also rotates. So when the stomach was rotating to the left side, the duodenum rotated to the right side and acquired its C-shaped loop. This is the mesoduodenum in the second picture. This is the mesoduodenum, the dorsal mesentery of the duodenum, in which the pancreas is also developing in its dorsal mesentery. Also, the ventral pancreatic bud is developing in its ventral mesentery. This pancreas is also influencing on the development of duodenum. So here we see in the transverse section the duodenum with its dorsal mesoduodenum and a structure pancreas dorsal pancreatic bud which is developing in the dorsal mesoduodenum. So with the rotation of the stomach, what is happening? The duodenum is also rotating to the right side. And one more influence on the duodenum is because of this pancreas which is developing. So both the duodenum and the pancreas press against, because of this growth of the pancreas, they will press against the dorsal body wall. And because of this, the right surface of the dorsal mesoduodenum will fuse with the adjacent peritoneum, and both the layers will be of mesoduodenum layers will be subsequently disappear, and this leads the duodenum and head of the pancreas to be fixed retroperitoneal. So they become retroperitoneal. So we are done with the development of esophagus, stomach and duodenum. The rest of the portions of the foregut derivatives, that is liver, gallbladder and pancreas, will be continuing after a short break. Thank you.